that I got this bike. Watch out. Oh, I need a helmet. Oh, yeah. 20 speed. Papa Willie, ready? I can't do it. All right. This is the Huffy Sonic 6 6-speed bike. Circa 1992. All right. I was 8 years old. I seen this commercial. Changed my life forever. Did it change your life today? No, it didn't. It made you scared and it made you nervous. This bike, let's see. This bike is... Hey, Daniel, will you take this bike to the back? Give it up for Daniel. There's nothing in my life that brought me more joy than taking this bike down a hill and then wiping out at the end of the hill, right? Y'all remember, you remember that. You was there. I didn't break anything. Man, I'm seriously out of breath. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. You got this on film? All right. When I was a kid, I loved to ride a bike, right? Who's with me? I loved to ride a bike. I loved riding it around the yard. I would ride it down the neighborhood. I loved bike riding. And when we got older, we would ride bikes as a family, right? People was there. We would ride bikes. Bikes were the thing. But when you get a job and you like cake and you like pizza too much, you don't ride a bike no more. I would pretend, when I was a kid, anybody watch Chips? Y'all know what I'm talking about? 70s people, maybe. I don't know. It was reruns when I was a kid, but I would pretend I was Chips. You know, California Highway Patrol. And it was like, wah, wah, wah. Y'all remember the theme, right? And I was on there, and I was riding. I was Ponch, not John. I was not John. He was not cool, but Ponch was cool. And so I was riding that thing, man, and that's what we would do. That's what we did. One time I took that bike down a hill, and I got in some riffraff, ran into a building, knocked myself clean out. I'm being drugged home by my sister and the neighbor, blood running all down my face. Got right back on the bike. The message is, when you get hit in the wall, you get right back on the bike. No, that's not the message. It's something that I enjoyed doing. I loved riding a bike when I was a kid. But eventually, life happens, right? Eventually, life happens. I want you to think about your childhood. What was the one thing that brought you joy? That you just had joy all in your life. Was it a family member? Was it something on TV? Maybe it was an action figure. Maybe it was a doll. Whatever it is, when you was a kid, it brought you complete and utter joy. You just remember that. You're just feeling that joy. But as you get older, you start to lose some of the joy. You start to lose some of the connections. Well, that's for kids. You know, obviously that bike that I was riding was for kids. It was not for a grown man. That's 220 pounds. Anyway. But you start to see things change over time. Sometimes things take your joy. Today's message is entitled, What Happened to My Joy? Everyone say, what happened? Can you remember exactly what you enjoyed? Maybe something gave you joy one time in your life. It doesn't matter if you're a kid or not, but when you're an adult, something gave you joy. Something made you so happy. And then somewhere along the line, that joy started to fade. Something happened. You lost your joy. It didn't happen all of a sudden. Maybe it was a fade. It didn't happen overnight. But you lost your joy. You were so excited at first. When you first got this one thing or first set foot in this one realm in your life and whatever it is, you were so excited. And then something comes up and steals your joy away or your joy starts to fade. What happens? Today's message has a deeper meaning than just what happened to you when you was a kid. I want to talk about your true joy today. I want to talk about the joy that you've experienced maybe in Christ or maybe coming to a place like this and all of a sudden the honeymoon's over. Things start to happen. Life starts to happen in your spirit. What happens to your joy in friendships? What happens to your joy in your marriage? What happens to your joy in your family, at your job, wherever you are? And you start to fade. Something starts to fade. Now, I'm under the impression that sometimes it's unforeseen circumstances. Sometimes it's things that happen to you that you didn't even mean, but sometimes it's what you did. I want to talk more about that today. If you have your Bibles, let's turn to Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 1. Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 1. What happened to your joy. I want to back up everything I'm saying today with biblical information. And if we don't back up what we're saying with biblical information, we're just having a club meeting, and we don't want to do that. We want to back it up with this. I want to give you a little bit of background story here. Nehemiah was a man who was a cupbearer to the king of Persia, which is modern-day Iran. And so this cupbearer, he was taken out of his home and placed in service to the king. And the cupbearer, as you may well know, is a person who brings the cup to the king and maybe taste it and make sure it's not poison. You know, I'm sure he had high insurance, but you know, he comes to the king and he has the cup, and he knows the king. He knows the king very well, but he is a man living outside of his own hometown. Because of the circumstances of the Israelite people, they were removed from their home and placed in service, many of them as slaves, to the Persians at this point in time. Now, this man, Nehemiah, he was a nationalist, I would call him. He was a patriot. He was a man who cared about his own hometown. He cared about his country. And he understood this to be his duty. As an Israelite, as a Jewish person, as a Hebrew person, that was his duty to care about Israel. And so all of a sudden through time, people are starting to go back. They're starting to be released, and they're going back to their own hometown, and they're assessing the damage. And his brother goes to Judea and finds something very crazy here. Let's look at it. Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 1. In late autumn, in the month of Kislev, all right, in the 12th year of King Artaxerxes, I got that one, reign, I was in the fortress of Susa. Hananiah, one of my brothers, came to visit me with some other men who had just arrived from Judah. I asked them about the Jews who had returned there from captivity, about how things were going in Jerusalem. They said to me, things are not well for those who have returned to the province of Judah. They are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem has been torn down, and the gates have been destroyed by fire. When I heard this, I sat down and wept. In fact, for days I mourned, fasted, and prayed to the God of heaven. Now, we have to understand the book of Nehemiah is like a journal. It's almost like you came across a journal and you opened it up and you started to read this man's life. And all of a sudden he's a cupbearer, and all of a sudden that these things happen, and he mourns for his own hometown because it's destroyed. Its destruction is everywhere. The gate is torn down. The buildings they're awful. Everything is so bad. And when they go back home, they find the ruins of war. It broke his heart. Imagine his heartbreak. This patriot, this nationalist, this person who stands up for the cause of Jerusalem, and he comes in and everything is destroyed. And he's heartbroken. You see, the joy he once had for his hometown was stolen from him. The joy he once had for the city that he would look at and he would see that Moses walked the people 40 years through the desert, and Joshua walked him right into that place. This was the place. This was God's promise to him. This was the joy of every Jerusalem dwelling person, every Jew, every Hebrew. This was the joy of it. This was their land. This was no one else's land. This is what God promised them, and here it is, destroyed. You see, what we must understand is, for a Jew living in a foreign land, going home was the only thing he could think about. Going home was what he wanted to do. It was not just a piece of land, it was his home, and it was in ruins. His joy was stolen from him. Now, many of us feel so many different emotions through life. Many of us have once experienced joy. And I'm not talking about happiness, and that has a part into it, but I'm talking about joy. I'm talking about the foundation. And all of a sudden, the foundations have cracks in them. And all of a sudden, everything seems to be falling apart, and you can't hold it together anymore. The thing that you once loved and you once cherished is now in pieces, and it starts to fall apart. How in the world can we restore joy like that? Again, this may have something to do with you. It may have something to do with anybody else. No matter the circumstance, how can we perceive joy? This morning, I'm going to put out a couple things. What happened to our joy? I'm going to put out 2 things this morning. And these are notes. You can take notes or you can just remember them. But there's things that we have to understand about joy. If joy has been removed from your life, these things may contribute to that removal. Number 1, sin may have taken it. What happened to my joy? Well, sin may have taken it. In Nehemiah's case, this certainly was the truth. Sin took the Israelites out of Jerusalem. That God said, if you always follow me, if you always call me your God, I will always protect you. And all of a sudden, sometime way back in the distant past, things started to crumble. They started not to look to God anymore. They started to look elsewhere and look in within themselves, and everything started to fall apart. And so God says, listen, I'm not going to back off on my promise. Look, it's on you. This is what you've done. And so they sinned, and so they were allowed to be conquered. You have to understand in Nehemiah's case, this was heartbreaking. He knew this is why. I want to explain it to you now. This is the next thing that he said. And he wrote down his prayer. Nehemiah chapter 1 verse 5. It says, O Lord. And then I said, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of unfailing love with those who love him and obey his commandments. Listen to my prayer. Look down and see me praying night and day for your people Israel. I confess, listen, I confess that we have sinned against you. Yes, even my own family and I have sinned. We have sinned terribly, not by obeying the commands, decrees, and the regulations that you have gave us through your servant Moses. There was no doubt in his mind that sin, when sin is committed and sin is entered into a situation, it brings separation between that person and God. The same holds true today for us. If you bring sin into a situation, into your life, you are initially successfully separating yourself from God. Now, that is not what we strive to do. Consider your life for a moment. There isn't a person here in this place or that can hear my voice who hasn't committed a sin. Think about your consequences of sin. Think about what you've done. Think about what it does to you. Think about what it does to your family, the ones around you. Think about this. It separates you from things. It takes away things. It makes people feel so low. And see, that's what sin is. It's a temptation. It's bait. And you take the bait and you're hooked. That's what sin does. It hooks you. Now, if we think about true joy for a moment, true joy, I'm talking about things that you think would never, ever leave your heart. True joy. Then we know joy itself is created by God. How many people agree with that? Say, I agree. Joy itself is created by God, but it's maintained by man. It's maintained by you and by me. It's maintained, it's kept by us. The things around us He creates brings us joy. You know what brings me joy? Days like today. Man, I love to wake up and I see the sun shining. I don't know, I'm just a positive person like that. I might make you sick, but I'm just positive about it. I love to go outside and, man, just see the sun shining. It just gives me a better mood. I don't know if it's like there's any research to that, but I'm just telling you personally. I love to go outside. I love to see nature. I love to be in nature. I love to be a part of especially, but not in the spring because I have allergies, but in the fall. You know, I get excited about being outside and seeing God's nature. Joy, God's nature brings me joy, right? And then even God says, you know, when He created all this, we read this in Genesis, and He created all things, He said, it is what? It is good. And He created nature, and He created the land, and created the sea. He said, it is good. And when God says something is good, man, that's joyful. That brings me excessive excited. If God says it's good, baby, it's good. And so we look at that, and we see that joyful in all of nature. And then man comes along and pollutes. Everyone say pollute. Pollutes nature. Now, you know, it irritates me when I see a bag of McDonald's sticking by the highway. All right, that irritates me because that's nature. Right? I don't like to see trash. I'm not telling everybody to go hug a tree. If you want to hug a tree, you go ahead. But I'm not telling you to go hug a tree. I'm just telling you I can't stand pollution. All right? Now, I'm not a green person. But I just don't like throwing trash out the window. Just throw it in the trash can. All right? You know what else ticks me off? This has nothing to do with this. When you don't put the buggy back in the cart thing. I went to Walmart the other day, and the thing was it was at the buggy, the cart holder, okay? It was there. Then you couldn't walk 5. Y'all pray for me. Back to what I was saying. Pollution. Sin pollutes your heart. Sin pollutes your joy. When you add pollution into your joy, then it separates you from what is clean, what is pure, what God had intended to do. This is same holds true in your spiritual life. You need that joy. You need that clean, pure joy that God provides. And if we infiltrate it with sin, then you separate yourself from joy. You want to know what happened to your joy? I want you to look in the spiritual mirror and say, is there anything inside of me that I've done? God help me. Is there anything inside of me that I've done that has separated myself from you? In Nehemiah's case, an entire nation had polluted the joy of what was given to them by sin. So God kept His promise. If they weren't faithful to Him, they were going to be overtaken, and that's exactly what happened. This broke this man's heart so that he even stood up and said, God, it's me. It's me. It's me only, and it's my family, and it's me. Forgive me. And he recognized this. Man, if we recognize sin in our life, man, that's a great, great thing. Now, there's nothing that can separate you from the love of God, and you can all come back to God's corner, and you may have to suffer the consequences of your sin just like they did. But man, it can get back to joy. You can get back to joy. I've lost joy in my life before. I've lost passion in my life before, not just the bicycle thing. But you know, when you lose passion for something that you're called to do, that's heartbreaking. When you lose passion because you can't see what's the next chapter, or 10 years down the road, you can't see what God's doing in your life, and you lose passion and you lose joy for what He's called you out to do, that is heartbreaking, not only to you, but to God. What should our prayer be? Our prayer should be, God, forgive me for my sin and restore in me the passion that you once put in me for this ministry, or for this family, or for this job, or for this person, or for that group of people. Whatever it is that God has given you a passion for, and you lose that passion and you lose that joy, prayer can certainly bring it back out of you. We just have to look into ourselves, see that thing, and eliminate it. It brings us to number 2. And this is the last one. What happened to your joy? Decisions in your life have taken your joy. Now, these cannot, let's get the sin side out of it for just a second. Let's just take sin out of the equation. You know, you can make the wrong decision and it not be sin. You can make the wrong decision and it not be sin. The truth is that sometimes we decide that we're going to have no joy. What does that mean? Sometimes you can decide that you're not going to have any joy. You can wake up and look at the sun shining like I do and go, meh. You can wake up and spend your whole day in a funk, in just a horrible mood, and you say, well, you don't know what such and such said to me. No, you are not allowing God to bring joy into your life. You're allowing that other person to infiltrate your life. Joy is a decision that we all have to make. Circumstances happen to us that we can't control. Amen? People treat us a certain way that upsets us. We get into this habit, everyone say habit. Habit of being in a dark place because of the situations around us. What I've learned in my adult life is to not blame someone else for my attitude. What I've learned is that it's not my family's fault that I had a cruddy day at work. It's not the dog's fault that, whatever happens, don't beat the dog. That was a joke that fell flat. All right. Your attitude controls everything. See, even in my bad jokes, I have a good attitude about it. That's not how you get your joy back. You don't get your joy back looking down at the ground, feeling sorry for yourself, feeling sorry for the situation. That is not where joy comes from. Joy comes from God, and you have the decision to make it. So Nehemiah decided to do something about his joy. He could no longer stand idly by while his hometown was destroyed, so he gets bold. He gets some guts. And I want to show you here, Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 2. And one day he was with the king and queen of Persia, and he's looking so sad. Then they noticed a difference in him, and the king asked me, "Why are you looking so sad? You don't look sick to me. You must be deeply troubled." Then I was terrified. "But," I replied, "long live the king. How can I not be sad? For the city where my ancestors are buried is in ruins, and the gates have been destroyed by fire." The king asked, "Well, how can I help you?" Remember that. With a prayer to the God of heaven, I replied, "If it please the king, and if you are pleased with me, your servant, send me to Judah to rebuild the city where my ancestors are buried." The king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked, "How long will you be gone? Then when will you return?" After I told him how long I would be gone, the king agreed to my request. You see, he decided that he was going to do something about it. And what did it take? Yeah, he was terrified. Yeah, he was scared. Yes, his joy was gone. And he was scared he wouldn't get the answer he wanted or anything like that. He was scared. And so he asked anyway, "Hey, can I have a break? Can I go and just do this thing? And you don't know how my heart is broken." And the king said, "What can I do to help you?" If you're heartbroken today because your joy's been stolen, if something's wrong with your life and you just can't get back to where you used to be, now everybody knows what I'm talking about today. Now I'm talking about that moment where you just felt God's joy and you just knew God was with you, but this seems like this has been so long since you felt that way. All you have to do is ask the king. All you have to do is ask the king. And that's what he did. Nehemiah asked the king of Persia. I'm asking you to ask the king of kings. You want your joy back? Decide that you want your joy back and ask the king of kings. This had to restore the joy of Nehemiah. What would it take to restore your joy? Think about that for a moment. What would it take? How drastic the measure? How bold do you have to be? What would it take for you and your joy to be restored in your life? What would it take? Would it take boldness? Would it take extreme action? Would it take something that all your friends and family and neighbors would think, "Oh, it is crazy"? What would it take? The reason that it would take some boldness sometimes and take extreme action sometimes is a decision that you have to make. But it was a decision nonetheless. The decisions we make in life define who we are. I'm going to get that's a moment to sink in there. The decisions in life define us, who we are. The choices that we make, the things that we do, the things that we say, the actions that we have define you and who you are. To be a Christ follower, you have to make a decision that Jesus Christ is God's Son and He's the Lord of your life. That's a decision. To be a good employee, you have to decide that you're going to be at work every day on time. And you're going to give 100% every single day. To be a good employee, you have to decide that's what you're going to do. If you're going to lose weight, you're going to have to decide that I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to be changed. It all starts with a decision. Listen, to make sure that your joy is secure, you have to make the decision that you're going to have joy no matter what. No matter who says anything to you, no matter what the circumstance is, no matter what your day is like, you're going to have joy. And you have to make that decision very first and foremost in the day. Remember, as I said weeks ago, today matters every single day. We live one day at a time. We don't live a year at a time or a decade at a time or a century at a time. We live one day at a time. And you have to make the decision this morning, today, that you are not going to let anyone break your joy. You're not going to let anyone steal your joy or even yourself. Even when you mess up and you sin and everything is like that, you say, "God, I've totally messed my life up. I need joy in my life. I'm not going to break. Over the years, I've had so much of a privilege and an honor in my life to do premarital counseling with couples who have gotten married. Some of them who sit in this crowd today, praise God, still together. But in recent years, I've come across a new book that has dramatically changed the way I even look at my own marriage. And I've kicked myself for not looking at this book from the day one, but God has His own timing. This book is called Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts, which is a great title. Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts. It's the book that I go to. It's the counseling, premarital counseling book that I look into. And it only has 7 chapters in it. One of the chapters is called this: Have you developed the habit of happiness? Now this is for premarital counselors, for young couples who want to get married and all this good stuff, and that's awesome. But man, I took this and I ran with it, because this is not only for couples, this is for individuals. I don't care what facet of life you are. I don't care how old or how young you are. This is for everybody. And I read this passage and I quote, "The bottom line is that happy couples decide to be happy. In spite of the troubles that life deals them, they make happiness a habit." End quote. You make happiness a habit. So you have to wake up every day and make joy a habit. I have some habits, and some of them are bad and some of them are good, but it's habits nonetheless. And there's things that I do that I put in my subconscious, and I just do them. It's the memory calls it the muscle memory. All right, that's what people call it, muscle memory. And you don't even have. It's like going to work and going, "How did I get here?" It's like everybody been driving and think, "How am I still surviving on the road?" That's what it's, muscle memory. And so this is a habit of joy. It's your muscle memory of joy. Isn't that cool? Don't we need that today? Don't we need joy in our life no matter what the circumstance? No matter what happens? Don't we need God's joy? This statement will change your perspective on how you allow to see things coming into your life. Are you shielded? Are you protected by things that would come against your joy and to make that foundation of joy crumble? Things like this, getting into the habit of a joyful habit, a joyful mindset, will shield you and protect you. You ever look at someone and say, "Man, how can that person be happy all the time?" I mean, it's almost annoying they're happy so much. It's probably me. But you look at that person and go, "There's no way they're this happy." No, they have developed a habit of happiness. They have developed a habit of joy. Nothing will break them. Nothing will crumble them. No physical pain, no emotional pain, no spiritual pain. There's nothing against that person that will take away their joy, because why? It's a gift from God. Let's have Vicky and Michelle come on up. So Nehemiah, with all his boldness and all his joy restored, is on his way back to his own country to fix what other people had messed up. It was his duty as a patriot to do this. It was his honor to do this. And he felt joy that he was going to get to. If you're sitting here today and asking yourself this, what's happened to my joy? Consider this. That sin may be in your life, and that you haven't decided that you're going to be joyful. You haven't decided it yet. Let's all stand.